All right, so I wanted to vlog a little bit about the 5 chapters that we've talked about, and I go a little out of order. So I'm going to start with chapter 4, and I think one of the big things that I learned was that was just like, wow. I think the 3 C's is honestly what I'm going to take into teaching, and the 3 C's are character, culture, and commitment. And as a teacher, like, those are the things that we're looking for, but also the things that we're always trying to build. We're always trying to build a community around us with character, culture, and commitment, and that's what you want, out of your students, but also like what you want out of each other, and like what you're looking for, if that makes sense. Like, it's always needed, and just how big of things that are needed in it. Also academic standards. I think us logging on to the Nebraska Department state standards and seeing the academic standards for like accommodations, that was really cool, because it was cool to see that behind the standards of normal, like, there's stuff that is still supporting kids that maybe are a little more behind. And with academic standards comes knowledge, skill, and understanding. And then we also talked about a lot about testing accommodations, and those can be as easy as more time, or they need visuals, or they need a ruler, right? A calculator, anything like that. And I think that's really big when figuring out what that student needs. Also, being descriptive as you can with an IEP. I feel like that's very easy to say, but I think it's so important that we are as descriptive as possible in an IEP, so that if someone were to pick it up, they know exactly what that student needs. But also for us, it makes it easier. And then once again, talking about those accommodations and modifications. So, accommodations is the how in terms, and the modification is the what. And just really making sure that we know the difference between the two. And then chapter 1, we really talked about the 7 elements of SPED. And then we really talked about the supplementary aids and services, and that kind of goes with PT, OT, can go paras, nurses. We actually were lucky enough on Wednesday night to get a OT to come in and talk to us in Mrs. Garwood's class. And I just want to say, like, that conversation we had with them, it made me really realize how much and how needed they are in a classroom. Whether it's working with the child on handwriting, or little stuff like that, they are needed. We had this whole debate for like 30 minutes over handwriting and spelling and what was more important, and they both came out with different answers, so it shows that the differences it can make. But they are so needed, and like the support that they give kids is phenomenal. The 2 ladies that came and talked to us were phenomenal. Like, it was such a good conversation, and just it was very good. We also talked about the 6 principles of IDEA and how they all like link together in one way or another, and that's when we did on the board, where we wrote them out and then connected them. And we also talked about a lot, which was like equal opportunity, full participation, economic self-sufficiency, and living independently, and how those all work together. So how all 6 steps work together, and how they're all fluctuating after another, and they all use each other to make one of those goals, if that makes any sense. And then also having high expectations with your students, knowing they can do more, and pushing them to be their best. I think that video you showed in class of the girl with Down syndrome, and how limiting her, like, if we say she can't do it, she's not gonna be able to do it. But if we tell her she can, she's gonna think she can. And I think that is really big as educators, to make sure that we're always pushing our kids to go to their highest potential, and never limiting them whatsoever on anything. And then for chapter 2, school systems can change, and then restorative justice programs, and then how big culture reflects your identity as a person. How big your culture is your identity itself, and I think that's really huge. I think going into Hastings Public Schools, you can really tell the culture is everyone's identity. Like, it is very positive, it's very upbringing, everyone has each other's backs, and I think that just shows who they are as people, but also how they work together and support each other. I think that's huge in a school system. But I think also, like, knowing and using those labels can also misclassify students when they're in more diverse groups or multiculturals, and just knowing, like, not to kind of have that bias whatsoever or anything going on in your head, or especially with, like, the misclassifications. I think that's a really big one that's put on SPED right now, and just really being aware and self-reflecting a lot on that. And then I have chapter 3, so it was all about family demographics. So by knowing the capacity of families can provide schools with related support. So knowing background on the family, you're going to know what type of support maybe the family is willing to help with. And I think that is really big, especially being with InSped, having that trusting partnerships, like always making sure that you're, open communication with parents, giving them a say, providing that emotional and informational support for them so that they don't feel like they don't know what's going on with their child, they don't understand. Like, keeping an open door of communication, like an open door policy is what I have in quotation marks, and just really knowing that. I think I see this a lot in my IEP meeting that I was in 2 weeks ago, and the special education teacher I watched really put the parent relationship, having that trusting partnership again. And, sometimes there's not easy conversations to have with parents. And I think when having that relationship can make those conversations maybe go a little bit easier if you know that parent's going to have your back, or if they don't have your back, they have a reason of why they would like to change, or what maybe is going on inside their head that they would like to accommodate for. But yeah, I think this is a really big one. I'm all about building bonds with people and building a relationship. And I think, especially with parents, really having that open door policy is really big. And then that was chapter 3. And then for chapter 6, I have really coming up with like a designed learning environment helps student outcomes. And then making sure that when an IEP comes out, or, a test comes out and a student needs help, making sure that we're selecting instructional strategies for those kids, making sure that they're getting those accommodations or modifications that they may need, and really taking a step to help them, and making it so that what is instructed is meant for them and tailored to them. Also, just having great, like, student outcomes. Like, I think also this relates to, making sure that small wins are still wins. I feel like, if your student is struggling with transitions and one day they don't struggle, like, that's a small win, but it's also a big win in a way. And I think taking those little by little and really taking them one thing at a time is super big. But I really enjoyed reading and taking notes over 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, and learning about this stuff. I think this stuff is really interesting for me. I just like talking about, demographics on, families. I like talking about partnerships. I think that's a really big thing. But I also feel like I relate a lot to, the differences of, people. Also making sure, like, when I go into a school, looking for the 3 C's, like, these are all stuff I feel like I'll be looking for and doing as a future, special education teacher. But I feel like really strongly about these 5 chapters, and I feel like I really understood the reading them and then working in class and then also being in the classroom has really opened my eyes to see a lot more things that I haven't seen in the schools, because I feel like a lot of times you talk about it but you don't really get to see it. And I feel like each chapter that we're going through, I feel like I'm starting to like everything's starting to be like an aha moment, like, oh, I didn't even realize. Like when we started talking about like the parents trust or whatever, the partnership, going into that IEP, I would have never thought to look at that. And then like reflecting on it, I was like, oh man, that was like a great point right there. Like this educator is really bringing these parents and giving them a say, and these parents are very supportive over their child and everything that they're doing for the school, and they thanked everyone in the room like 7 times. So like having that partnership and that bond, even though it's not always the greatest of easiest conversations, it's just really big, I feel like. And yeah, I have no further questions, and I hope you have a great weekend. And yeah, okay, thank you.